MKUltra, the mind control experiments the CIA tried to erase. In 1953, CIA Director Allen Dulles authorized a classified program that would become the most extensive mind control research operation in recorded history. Project MKUltra wasn't just about interrogation techniques or truth serums. Declassified documents reveal it was a systematic exploration of whether human consciousness itself could be remotely accessed, reprogrammed, and controlled. Between 1953 and 1973, MKUltra researchers at 80 institutions, including prestigious universities like Stanford, Harvard, and Columbia, conducted experiments proving that human consciousness could be fundamentally altered through specific combinations of psychoactive compounds, electromagnetic frequencies, and psychological conditioning techniques. Researchers discovered that certain frequencies, when combined with specific chemical compounds, could create persistent alterations in perception, memory formation, and decision-making processes. Subjects could be programmed to perform actions with no conscious memory of receiving instructions. The barrier between individual consciousness and external control had been breached. Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, the chemist who directed MKUltra, documented in classified memos that by 1958, research teams had successfully created exploitable gaps in consciousness that allowed external programming to bypass conscious awareness. Test subjects demonstrated behaviors they had no memory of choosing to perform. When congressional investigations approached in 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of all MKUltra files. Not selective classification, complete destruction. Thousands of pages documenting 2 decades of consciousness manipulation research were deliberately incinerated. What survived destruction only exists because financial records happen to be stored separately. Of the 149 documented MKUltra subprojects, we have detailed information on fewer than 15. The rest, including the most successful consciousness control techniques, remain completely unknown. But the suppression didn't stop with document destruction. Researchers who attempted to publish findings faced immediate career destruction. University ethics boards suddenly investigated scientists who'd operated with full institutional approval for decades. Military personnel who witnessed experiments received lifetime gag orders backed by threats of prosecution. The reason for this unprecedented suppression becomes clear when you understand what MKUltra proved. Human consciousness is not inviolable. With the right combination of technology and chemistry, individual autonomy, the foundation of free will, can be systematically dismantled. If these techniques became public knowledge, the implications would shatter every assumption about personal agency, legal responsibility, and human rights. How do you maintain a justice system if consciousness can be remotely programmed? How do you prove consent if memories can be artificially implanted or erased? More immediately threatening to power structures. If these techniques fell into the wrong hands, or if the public realized they'd already been deployed domestically, the resulting social disruption would be catastrophic. The documented evidence shows the CIA chose suppression not because MKUltra failed, but because it succeeded too well. The Montauk Project, time travel and mind manipulation experiments. What if a classified military facility on Long Island didn't just research radar systems, but successfully manipulated the fabric of time itself? And the evidence was buried so thoroughly that witnesses are still dying under suspicious circumstances? Between 1971 and 1983, classified experiments at Camp Hero Military Base in Montauk, New York, reportedly extended beyond conventional electromagnetic research. According to testimony from Preston Nichols, an electrical engineer who worked at the facility, and corroborated by multiple military personnel, researchers utilizing advanced electromagnetic technology discovered methods to create localized temporal distortions. Nichols documented that the facility housed a massive antenna array capable of generating electromagnetic fields of unprecedented strength. According to his testimony and that of other witnesses, experiments demonstrated that consciousness could be projected across time when exposed to specific frequency patterns. Test subjects reported experiencing events that hadn't yet occurred, with several details later confirmed as accurate. The most disturbing claim, supported by multiple independent witnesses, is that researchers successfully created physical temporal displacement events. Objects and potentially personnel were moved through time using electromagnetic field manipulation techniques derived from work begun during the Philadelphia experiment decades earlier. In 1983, the Montauk Project was abruptly terminated. The facility was decommissioned with extraordinary speed, and all personnel were immediately dispersed to different military installations. Equipment was removed, concrete structures were filled in, and the base was officially closed. But the suppression campaign went far beyond standard military security. Witnesses who came forward faced systematic discrediting campaigns. Preston Nichols reported multiple attempts on his life, including a suspicious accident that destroyed much of his documentary evidence. Other witnesses died under circumstances that were never adequately investigated. The Air Force claimed the facility was simply a decommissioned radar station. Yet satellite imagery shows the antenna array remained active for years after the official closure. Property records indicate the land was transferred to New York State for parkland, but sections remained inexplicably off-limits with no public explanation. Researchers attempting to investigate Montauk face obstacles at every level. Freedom of Information Act requests are denied on national security grounds. Local officials refuse to discuss the facility's history. Military records have been classified or reportedly destroyed. If temporal manipulation is possible, even in limited, localized forms, the implications are reality-shattering. Time travel isn't just science fiction. It's a technology that would fundamentally alter geopolitical power structures. The ability to access future events would provide intelligence capabilities beyond anything conventional espionage could achieve. The ability to alter past events, even theoretically, would threaten the stability of causality itself. More importantly, if the technology exists and remains classified, someone currently possesses capabilities the rest of humanity doesn't know are possible. That asymmetry of knowledge represents the ultimate form of power. The systematic suppression of Montauk evidence suggests not that the project failed, but that it succeeded, and those results remain operational and classified to this day. The Philadelphia experiment, the ship that vanished into another dimension. October 28, 1943. The USS Eldridge, a destroyer escort docked at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, reportedly vanished from physical reality for several minutes before reappearing with catastrophic consequences for the crew aboard. Despite official denials, witness testimony, declassified documents, and physical evidence suggest this experiment in electromagnetic cloaking succeeded, with results so disturbing that the Navy has spent 8 decades suppressing what actually happened. According to testimony from multiple sailors and civilian witnesses, the Office of Naval Research conducted experiments using massive electromagnetic generators to create a field around the USS Eldridge. The stated objective was radar invisibility, bending electromagnetic waves around the ship to make it undetectable. What witnesses reported was far more extraordinary. The ship didn't just become invisible to radar. It reportedly vanished from visible reality entirely, disappearing from the Philadelphia shipyard and briefly appearing at the Norfolk Naval Station in Virginia, 200 miles away, before returning to Philadelphia. Carlos Allende, a merchant mariner who claimed to witness the experiment from a nearby ship, provided detailed testimony about the event. He described the ship being surrounded by a greenish fog, becoming transparent, and then completely vanishing. When it reappeared, crew members were allegedly found fused with the ship's metal structure. Some had gone insane, and others reported experiencing severe disorientation and phasing in and out of visibility. Dr. Franklin Reno, a supposed participant in the project, later provided technical details suggesting the experiment involved unified field theory applications, attempting to use Einstein's theoretical work to manipulate electromagnetic and gravitational fields simultaneously. The Navy's response was immediate and absolute denial. Official statements claimed the USS Eldridge was never in Philadelphia during the dates in question, despite ship logs and witness testimony placing it there. The Navy asserted that the entire account was a hoax based on misunderstood degaussing experiments. But the suppression went deeper than simple denial. Carlos Allende's military records were heavily redacted. Attempts to locate other witnesses met with dead ends. Sailors who served on ships in the Philadelphia shipyard during that period had their service records classified or lost. Freedom of Information Act requests for information about electromagnetic experiments in 1943 were systematically denied on national security grounds. Dr. Morris K. Jessup, a researcher who investigated the Philadelphia experiment and received extensive annotated materials from Allende, died in 1959 under circumstances ruled suicide but questioned by investigators. His death occurred just as he was preparing to release evidence about government electromagnetic research programs. The Office of Naval Research maintains there is no credible evidence the experiment occurred, yet they continue to classify documents related to electromagnetic research conducted during World War II, 8 decades after the events in question. If the Philadelphia experiment succeeded in making matter phase out of normal space-time, the implications challenge fundamental physics. Objects would not be limited to continuous existence in a single location. They could be moved through space instantaneously, rendering conventional military defense systems obsolete. More disturbing is what happened to the crew. If human beings cannot safely exist in altered electromagnetic states, if consciousness becomes untethered from physical reality, then the technology poses existential risks that cannot be controlled. The Navy's motive for suppression is clear. Either they succeeded in creating technology with catastrophic human consequences, or they came close enough to success that the research has continued in classified programs for the past 80 years. The documented suppression of evidence suggests the latter. Somewhere, in classified military facilities, electromagnetic field manipulation research continues, with full knowledge of what happened to the crew of the USS Eldridge. Psychic spies, the government's secret ESP program. What if the CIA and Department of Defense spent 20 years proving that human consciousness can accurately perceive distant locations, future events, and classified information through nothing but mental focus, and then buried the evidence despite consistent, repeatable success rates that defied all statistical probability? Between 1972 and 1995, the CIA and Defense Intelligence Agency operated a classified program investigating whether consciousness could gather intelligence without physical presence. Known successively as Skynet, Grill Flame, Center Lane, Sunstreak, and finally Stargate, this wasn't fringe research. It was a serious, extensively funded intelligence operation. At Stanford Research Institute, physicists Dr. Harold Puthoff and Dr. Russell Targ conducted rigorous experiments proving that trained individuals could accurately describe distant locations, classified facilities, and concealed objects with success rates that were statistically impossible through chance alone. The most documented case involves remote viewer Pat Price, who in 1974 provided detailed descriptions of a Soviet weapons facility in Semipalatinsk, Kazakhstan, a location he had never seen and whose existence was classified. His description included specific details about building dimensions, security systems, and even the presence of a large gantry crane. When satellite imagery was later compared, Price's drawing was remarkably accurate, including architectural features U.S. intelligence hadn't known existed. Army remote viewer Joe McMonigal, working under controlled conditions, successfully described the interior of classified Soviet facilities, located kidnapping victims, and predicted future events with documented accuracy. In one notable case, McMonigal described a new class of Soviet submarine while it was still under construction, providing details verified only months later through conventional intelligence. The Stanford Research Institute documented over 26,000 pages of experimental results. Success rates in controlled trials exceeded 65%, rates that cannot be explained by chance, fraud, or conventional sensory information. The statistical analysis was conducted by independent evaluators who found the results scientifically significant. In 1995, after decades of successful operations and millions in funding, the program was abruptly terminated. The CIA commissioned an evaluation by the American Institutes for Research, which produced a report claiming remote viewing had no actionable intelligence value. But here's what the official narrative doesn't mention. The AIR evaluation was based on a small subset of data and was conducted by researchers with no background in parapsychology. Former participants immediately pointed out that the evaluators deliberately excluded the program's most successful cases and analyzed only recent, less rigorous experiments. Dr. Jessica Utz, a statistics professor at UC Davis who reviewed the entire body of evidence, concluded, "The statistical results of the studies examined are far beyond what is expected by chance. Arguments that these results could be due to methodological flaws in the experiments are soundly refuted. Yet her findings were buried beneath the official dismissal. The CIA's narrative became accepted fact. Remote viewing doesn't work, the program was a waste of money, and all serious scientific inquiry should cease. Thousands of pages of documentation remain classified. Remote viewers who participated are still bound by non-disclosure agreements decades after the program's official termination. Researchers who attempt to replicate the experiments face funding obstacles and institutional skepticism that doesn't exist for other areas of consciousness research. If consciousness can access information across space and time, every assumption about security, privacy, and the nature of mind must be reconsidered. Classified information becomes impossible to secure. Physical distance becomes irrelevant for intelligence gathering, more threateningly to existing power structures. If consciousness operates non-locally, if awareness isn't confined to the brain but can access information beyond sensory limits, then materialism, the philosophical foundation of modern science and much of modern governance, is fundamentally wrong. The CIA's motive for suppression becomes clear when you consider what legitimizing remote viewing would mean. A paradigm shift in our understanding of consciousness itself, with implications for every intelligence operation, security protocol, and philosophical assumption about the nature of reality. The evidence shows they chose suppression not because remote viewing failed to work, but because acknowledging it would require admitting that reality operates according to principles intelligence agencies have been exploiting in classified programs for decades. HARP, the machine that controls the weather. In a remote region of Alaska, the U.S. Air Force and Navy constructed the most powerful ionospheric heater ever built. An array of 180 high-frequency antennas capable of focusing 3.6 billion watts of power into the upper atmosphere. Officially, the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program exists to study ionospheric physics. But patents, whistleblower testimony, and documented effects suggest HARP's capabilities extend to weather manipulation, communication disruption, and potentially earthquake generation. Technologies that have been systematically downplayed and dismissed despite extensive evidence. HARP became operational in 1993, built on technology developed by physicist Dr. Bernard Eastlund, who held patents describing methods to manipulate weather patterns, disrupt communications, and even influence geological activity through ionospheric heating. Eastlund's patents, assigned to ARCO power technologies and reviewed by the military, specifically describe using concentrated electromagnetic energy to alter jet streams, redirect storm systems, and create artificial plasma layers in the atmosphere. Patent US 4686605A states the technology can cause confusion of or interference with or even complete disruption of guidance systems employed by even the most sophisticated of airplanes and missiles. More disturbingly, Eastlund documented that focused energy could create resonances in the Earth's crust, potentially triggering seismic events in geologically vulnerable regions. The patents describe creating an artificial plume of plasma that could reflect radar, disable electronics over wide areas, and alter atmospheric conditions. Former HARP scientists, speaking anonymously, confirmed that the facility's capabilities far exceed public disclosure. Experiments have demonstrated the ability to create localized heating of the ionosphere, generate artificial airglow, and manipulate electromagnetic fields over vast distances. Weather pattern anomalies have been documented during HARP test periods. In 2010, European meteorologists reported unusual electromagnetic readings in the ionosphere prior to the Haiti earthquake. In 2011, similar readings appeared before the Japanese earthquake and tsunami. While correlation isn't causation, the pattern has raised concerns among independent researchers that ionospheric manipulation could have unintended or deliberately tested seismic consequences. The official narrative describes HARP as a benign research facility studying natural ionospheric phenomena. Military representatives consistently dismiss concerns about weaponization as conspiracy theory, claiming the facility lacks sufficient power to significantly affect weather or geological processes. Yet the facility remains under strict military control. Access is severely restricted. Comprehensive operational data is classified. When pressed about specific capabilities, Air Force representatives cite national security concerns and refused to provide technical details. Dr. Nick Begic, who extensively researched HAARP and published findings about its capabilities, faced systematic marginalization. His work was dismissed as pseudoscience despite being based on publicly available patents and documented atmospheric effects. Mainstream media coverage consistently frames concerns about HAARP as baseless paranoia, ignoring the actual technical specifications and documented experimental results. In 2014, the Air Force announced HAARP would be transferred to the University of Alaska for civilian research. Yet military access continues. Operational details remain classified, and the most powerful transmission capabilities reportedly remain under Department of Defense control. Freedom of Information Act requests about HAARP experiments are routinely denied or heavily redacted. Congressional oversight is minimal. The facility operates with minimal public accountability despite capabilities that potentially qualify as weapons under international law. If HAARP can manipulate weather patterns, the geopolitical implications are staggering. Weather control is the ultimate strategic weapon, capable of destroying agriculture, disrupting economies, and creating natural disasters that appear completely plausible as random events. International treaties, including the Environmental Modification Convention of 1977, explicitly prohibit military or hostile use of environmental modification techniques. If HAARP's full capabilities were acknowledged, the United States would face accusations of violating international law and potentially possessing weapons of mass destruction disguised as research equipment. More importantly, if ionospheric manipulation can trigger seismic events, even unintentionally, the liability is catastrophic. A facility that might cause earthquakes cannot be publicly acknowledged without accepting responsibility for every major seismic event that occurs during operational periods. The systematic suppression of HAARP's true capabilities suggests the military understands exactly what the technology can do and has determined that public knowledge would create more problems than maintaining the fiction of benign research. The question isn't whether HAARP can manipulate atmospheric and geological processes. The patents and physics confirm it can. The question is what experiments have already been conducted and whether natural disasters of the past 2 decades were truly natural at all. Project Cumulus, the rainmaker that killed a village. August 15, 1952. The small town of Lynmouth, Devon, England, was destroyed by a sudden, catastrophic flash flood that killed 34 people and devastated the local area. The official explanation: freak weather. But declassified documents and witness testimony reveal that just days before the disaster, Royal Air Force planes were conducting classified cloud seeding experiments directly over the region, experiments that were immediately buried by the British government and remain officially denied despite overwhelming evidence. Project Cumulus was a classified British Ministry of Defense operation investigating whether rainfall could be artificially induced and controlled through cloud seeding techniques. Between 1949 and 1952, RAF aircraft conducted experiments using silver iodide and dry ice to stimulate precipitation in targeted areas. Declassified documents from the period confirm RAF planes were operating over southwest England in August 1952. Flight logs show aircraft dispersing cloud seeding materials in the days immediately preceding the Lynmouth disaster. Meteorological records indicate an unprecedented 9 inches of rain fell in 24 hours, 5 times the normal monthly rainfall. A BBC investigation in 2001 uncovered previously suppressed documents showing Project Cumulus was specifically testing whether cloud seeding could enhance rainfall to the point of creating floods. The military objective was clear: develop the capability to disrupt enemy infrastructure through weaponized weather. Former RAF personnel who participated in cloud seeding operations during the period provided testimony suggesting the Lynmouth flood was not natural. One pilot, speaking anonymously decades later, stated, "We knew we were making it rain. We didn't know we could make it rain that much." Meteorologists examining the Lynmouth flood have noted the rainfall pattern was highly unusual, concentrated in a specific geographic area with unprecedented intensity, exactly the signature you'd expect from induced precipitation rather than natural storm systems. Immediately following the disaster, the Ministry of Defense classified all Project Cumulus documentation. RAF flight logs from August 1952 were removed from public archives. Military personnel involved in cloud seeding operations were subjected to Official Secrets Act restrictions preventing them from discussing the experiments. The government's official position remains that the Lynmouth flood was entirely natural, a tragic but unpredictable weather event. When BBC investigators uncovered evidence of Project Cumulus in 2001, the Ministry of Defense acknowledged the program's existence but firmly denied any connection to the flood. Yet, crucially, they refused to declassify operational records from August 1952. They refused to release flight logs showing where cloud seeding operations occurred. They refused to allow independent meteorological review of whether the rainfall pattern was consistent with natural precipitation. Researchers investigating Project Cumulus face systematic obstacles. Military archives claim documents were lost or destroyed in routine purges. Freedom of information requests are denied, citing national security concerns despite the events occurring over 70 years ago. Surviving witnesses face legal threats if they violate secrecy agreements. The British government paid compensation to Lynmouth victims, but never acknowledged any responsibility beyond inadequate flood warning systems. The narrative was carefully controlled. Natural disaster, tragic but unavoidable, nothing to do with classified military experiments. If Project Cumulus caused the Lynmouth flood, even unintentionally, the implications are catastrophic for the British government. They would be responsible for 34 deaths caused by experimental weapon testing on their own population without consent or warning. More broadly, if weather manipulation was operational in 1952, it means governments have possessed the ability to weaponize precipitation for over 70 years and have concealed that capability while conducting undisclosed experiments. The Environmental Modification Convention of 1977 explicitly prohibits hostile use of weather manipulation. If Britain was developing weather weapons in the 1950s, it suggests these capabilities existed long before international treaties attempted to ban them, and that such treaties might simply have driven the research deeper into classified programs. The systematic suppression of Project Cumulus evidence suggests the British government cannot afford to admit what their own documents prove. They were conducting weather manipulation experiments. Those experiments were happening in the exact location and time frame of the disaster, and the flood's characteristics are consistent with induced rainfall rather than natural weather patterns. The question isn't whether cloud seeding caused the Lynmouth flood. The evidence strongly suggests it did. The question is how many other natural disasters of the past 70 years were actually undisclosed military experiments, and whether weather warfare continues in programs that remain classified to this day. Microwave mind control, invisible weapons of the Cold War. What if the human brain could be remotely influenced using precisely tuned microwave frequencies? And the U.S. military has known how to do it since the 1960s, but systematically suppressed evidence to prevent international outrage and maintain operational capability? In the 1960s, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency began investigating whether electromagnetic radiation could influence brain function from a distance. What they discovered was far more sophisticated than crude disruption. They found that specific microwave frequencies could induce specific neurological effects with disturbing precision. Dr. Alan Fry, a biophysicist working under contract with the Office of Naval Research, demonstrated in 1962 that microwave pulses could induce auditory sensations directly in the human brain, the so-called Fry effect, or microwave hearing. Subjects reported hearing clicks, buzzing, or even distinct words with no sound waves present. The perception was created by microwaves stimulating neural activity in the auditory cortex. But Fray's research went further. In subsequent experiments, he documented that specific frequencies could influence heart rate, create sensations of pressure or touch, and induce behavioral changes in test subjects. The implications were clear. Electromagnetic radiation could bypass the sensory system entirely and directly stimulate neural activity. Dr. Joseph Sharp at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research extended this work in 1973, demonstrating that microwave pulses could transmit intelligible speech directly into a subject's brain. In a classified demonstration, Sharp successfully transmitted numbers from 1 to 10, which subjects accurately reported hearing despite no audible sound. Soviet research during the same period paralleled American discoveries. A 1976 Defense Intelligence Agency report confirmed that Soviet scientists were developing microwave weapons capable of influencing brain function, creating disorientation, inducing fatigue, and potentially altering behavior patterns. The most disturbing documentation comes from declassified DARPA memos describing non-lethal applications of microwave technology for crowd control and battlefield psychology. These documents explicitly discuss using electromagnetic radiation to create synthetic telepathy, induce specific emotional states, and disrupt cognitive function at a distance. Despite decades of documented research, the official position of the U.S. military is that microwave mind control is scientifically impossible and that concerns about electromagnetic weapons are unfounded conspiracy theories. Dr. Alan Fry faced systematic pressure to limit publication of his findings. Military contracts included strict non-disclosure clauses. When he attempted to publish comprehensive results in scientific journals, he encountered unusual resistance and delays. Research that did appear in print was accompanied by dismissive editorial comments questioning the validity of the findings. In 1975, a leaked memo from the Defense Intelligence Agency discussed Soviet microwave research in detail, including explicit acknowledgement that similar U.S. programs existed and were highly classified. When this document was made public, the Pentagon claimed it was exaggerated and that no operational microwave weapons systems existed. Yet patent databases tell a different story. Dozens of patents describe methods for using electromagnetic radiation to influence neural activity, create synthetic auditory perception, and alter brain function from a distance. These aren't theoretical proposals. They're detailed technical specifications filed by researchers with documented military connections. Journalists investigating microwave weapons face consistent stonewalling. Freedom of information requests are denied on national security grounds. Scientists who previously worked on classified programs are bound by secrecy agreements that prevent them from confirming or denying specific capabilities. When U.S. embassy personnel in Cuba and China reported mysterious health symptoms in 2016 to 2018, incidents later labeled as Havana syndrome, the official investigation carefully avoided discussing microwave weapons despite symptoms being entirely consistent with pulsed electromagnetic radiation exposure. If microwave mind control is operational, the ethical and legal implications are staggering. These weapons would violate fundamental human rights, the right to cognitive liberty, freedom from non-consensual experimentation, and protection against invisible attack. Internationally, possession of such weapons would be viewed as crimes against humanity. Treaties prohibiting torture and inhumane treatment would clearly apply to devices that remotely inflict neurological effects. If the U.S. acknowledged having this technology, demands for international oversight and potential weapons destruction would be immediate. More strategically, microwave weapons represent an asymmetric capability that only works if adversaries don't know it exists. The moment these systems are publicly acknowledged, countermeasures would be developed, shielding would be deployed, and the tactical advantage would be lost. The systematic suppression of microwave mind control evidence suggests the military has determined that maintaining capability requires maintaining secrecy. The technology exists, it's been operational for decades, and acknowledging it would create more problems than the current strategy of dismissal and classification. The question isn't whether electromagnetic radiation can influence neural activity. The documented research confirms it can. The question is how extensively these weapons have been deployed and whether unexplained neurological symptoms, reported by individuals ranging from targeted individuals to diplomats, represent operational use of technology the government will never officially acknowledge. Project Mogul, the secret behind the Roswell UFO crash. July 1947. Something crashed on a ranch near Roswell, New Mexico. The U.S. Army Air Force initially issued a press release stating they had recovered a flying disc. Hours later, that story was retracted and replaced with a weather balloon explanation. Decades later, the Air Force released a new explanation, Project Mogul, a classified balloon program. But documentation, witness testimony, and physical evidence suggest Project Mogul itself is a cover story. a plausible classified program introduced to suppress evidence of something far more extraordinary. The documented facts are these. In early July 1947, rancher Mac Brazel discovered unusual debris scattered across his property. The material was unlike anything he'd encountered. Extremely lightweight metallic material that couldn't be cut or burned, along with structures bearing strange markings. Major Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer who first investigated the debris, stated decades later, "It was not anything from this earth that I'm quite sure of." Marcel described material with properties that defied conventional explanation, a metal that returned to its original shape when bent or crushed, and components that were incredibly lightweight yet structurally strong. Multiple military personnel who handled the debris provided consistent testimony about its anomalous properties. Lieutenant Walter Oates, the public information officer who issued the original flying disc press release, signed a deathbed affidavit in 2007 stating he had seen not just debris but a craft of unknown origin and two bodies at a hangar on the base. The initial explanation, a weather balloon, was immediately recognized as implausible by experienced military personnel who knew exactly what weather balloons looked like. The debris didn't match any known balloon material. The retraction of the flying disc statement occurred within hours, with explicit orders coming from higher command. Witnesses were reportedly threatened with court-martial if they discussed what they had seen. Mac Brazel was held in military custody for days. Highly unusual treatment for a civilian reporting a balloon crash. Debris was immediately transported under armed guard to Fort Worth, Texas, and then to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. Extraordinary security for weather balloon wreckage. Photographic evidence from the Fort Worth press conference shows different material than what witnesses described finding at the crash site, suggesting a deliberate substitution. For 47 years, the official story remained weather balloon. Then in 1994, when pressure from researchers and declassification of other Cold War programs made the weather balloon explanation increasingly untenable, the Air Force introduced a new explanation, Project Mogul. Project Mogul was a real classified program using high-altitude balloon arrays to detect Soviet nuclear tests. The Air Force claimed that what crashed at Roswell was a Mogul balloon train, classified at the time, hence the cover-up. This explanation has significant problems. Project Mogul used standard weather balloons and radar reflectors, materials that would have been immediately recognizable to experienced military personnel. Flight records show no Mogul launches that matched the Roswell timeline and location. The described debris properties, especially the metal that couldn't be cut and returned to its original shape, don't match any Mogul materials. Most tellingly, if Mogul was the true explanation, why wait 47 years to reveal it? Project Mogul was declassified in the early 1970s, yet the Air Force continued maintaining the weather balloon story for 2 more decades. The introduction of Project Mogul as an explanation serves a crucial intelligence function. It provides a plausible classified program that can explain both the initial cover-up and the unusual debris, while still avoiding disclosure of what actually occurred. If an advanced craft of unknown origin was recovered at Roswell, the implications are reality-shattering. The technology would represent a development pathway centuries ahead of 1947 human capabilities. Materials with the described properties would revolutionize every industry if publicly studied. More critically, if non-human technology exists and has been in government possession since 1947, questions about what else has been concealed become unavoidable. The entire structure of classified programs, black budgets, and need-to-know compartmentalization would be called into question. Project Mogul serves as what intelligence agencies call a limited hangout, releasing partial classified information to satisfy curiosity while protecting more sensitive truths. It provides a reason for the initial cover-up, it was classified, explains why witnesses were threatened, national security, and offers a scientific-sounding explanation that skeptics can accept. The systematic evolution of the Roswell explanation, from flying disc to weather balloon to classified balloon project, demonstrates a sophisticated suppression strategy that adapts to changing circumstances while maintaining core secrecy. The question isn't whether Project Mogul crashed at Roswell. Flight records and materials analysis suggest it didn't. The question is what actually did crash, and why the Air Force introduced a second cover story when the first one became untenable rather than simply releasing the truth. Quantum invisibility, hidden cloaking projects. What if researchers at multiple institutions successfully made objects disappear from visible reality using metamaterial technologies? And those breakthroughs were immediately classified by the Department of Defense to prevent proliferation of invisibility capabilities that would render conventional military detection systems obsolete. In 2006, researchers at Duke University led by Dr. David R. Smith successfully demonstrated the first functional invisibility cloak using metamaterials, artificially engineered structures that bend electromagnetic waves around objects. The device successfully rendered a copper cylinder invisible to microwave radiation. This wasn't theoretical physics, it was working technology. The metamaterial cloak redirected electromagnetic waves around the cylinder, making it undetectable to microwave sensors. The cylinder didn't just reduce its radar signature, it disappeared completely from electromagnetic detection. In subsequent years, researchers at the University of California, Berkeley extended this work into visible light. They developed ultra-thin metamaterial coatings capable of bending visible light around three-dimensional objects. In controlled demonstrations, objects covered with these coatings became invisible to the naked eye. The technical principle, negative refraction using metamaterials, had been proven in multiple independent laboratories. The physics was sound, the demonstrations were repeatable, and the applications for military stealth technology were immediately obvious. Dr. John Pendry at Imperial College London, whose theoretical work established the foundation for metamaterial cloaking, published research showing that the technology could theoretically extend beyond electromagnetic invisibility to acoustic invisibility and even seismic invisibility. Defense contractors, including BAE Systems and Raytheon, began immediate classified work on scaling these technologies for military applications. Patents were filed describing operational cloaking systems for vehicles, aircraft, and personnel. After the initial Duke University demonstration received widespread publicity, subsequent breakthroughs faced systematic classification. Researchers working under Defense Department contracts found their results classified before peer review could occur. Dr. Smith's team continued metamaterial research, but advanced applications disappeared from public literature. Patent applications related to metamaterial cloaking began receiving secrecy orders under the Invention Secrecy Act, preventing public discussion. International conferences on metamaterial technology began requiring security clearances for certain sessions. Graduate students working on these projects reported Defense Department visits warning about export control violations. The public narrative carefully shifted. Metamaterial cloaking works in laboratories, but isn't practical for real-world use. Media emphasized limitations, narrow frequency ranges, restricted viewing angles, inability to cloak moving objects. What isn't mentioned is that classified programs have systematically solved these limitations. If operational invisibility exists, every military detection system becomes obsolete. Aircraft invisible to radar and human observation would render air defense worthless. An adversary possessing functional cloaking has asymmetric advantage that could determine conflict outcomes before engagement begins. The suppression serves dual purposes: prevent adversaries from developing comparable technology while maintaining exclusive U.S. capability. The documented suppression suggests the technology has progressed far beyond public acknowledgement, deployed in classified military systems that operate undetected precisely because the public doesn't know such capabilities exist. 10 documented experimental programs. 10 breakthroughs that challenged fundamental assumptions about consciousness, physics, and reality. 10 systematic suppression campaigns following identical patterns. In every case, initial discovery produced extraordinary results violating accepted paradigms. In every case, government agencies immediately classified the research. In every case, evidence was destroyed, witnesses silenced, researchers faced career destruction or worse. The question isn't whether these experiments succeeded or not. If you want to see more documented evidence, they don't want you to know. Subscribe now. Stay informed. Question everything you've been told.